I didn't know in advance there would be a Soul of Yoga. I didn't know in advance that I really was going to leave the ashram, but I did after 25 years. And what a preparation for that I had for starting something like the Soul of Yoga. The real motivating factor of all of this was finding Paramahansa's teachings, Yogananda, self-realization teachings, because I had an instant attraction from the first words that I read, and it never has changed. It has just grown deeper and deeper. So I have to, put it all on that teacher, who you could say is the guru, is the one that I believe is assigned to help my soul to go back into soul realization. And so that's the essence of my teacher. There was a monk who was my mentor teacher in the ashram. Special man. He was a duke from Czechoslovakia. He was one of the richest men in Europe, the most well-dressed men in Europe. Knew 14 languages. Was a concert pianist. Was in World War II in the concentration camps, and just one of those guys that totally Renaissance man, but a deep spirituality that came also from his relationship with Yogananda, that drew him from that life that I just... Oh, one of the most famous mountain men, climbers in Europe as well, climbing solo. And he was my first teacher in the ashram, and he became my teacher, my mentor, my coach for the rest of his life, which is about 18 years, and then he passed.
There were mentors that saw potential in me that I never saw, that saw gifts in me that I was blind to. I didn't have low self-esteem. It's just I had put myself in a box. So I had mentors that made me feel like I could achieve anything, not just on the physical level, but on the spiritual level, which at the time was the most important thing. I was so blessed to be very, very close to a monk by the name of Brother Anandamoy in the Yogananda tradition. He was actually trained directly by Yogananda. And he was a brilliant teacher. And he was quite a developed yogi. And I used to call him my spiritual papa. The unconditional love and nurturing that I got from him changed my life. It changed me. It changed the way I saw myself. And remember, I was in my 20s. So that was a really important time for me. Because, when we're in our 20s, we're still figuring out who we are and our self-worth. So he was really important.
Brother Prema-Moy. Brother Prema-Moy. Prema is love. So more love. Moy is more love. Brother Prema-Moy. Oh, and he had a green thumb too. I mean, he knew plants. The plants reacted in. He put a lot of those plants there at the Encinitas Gardens. And but he also had a green thumb for souls. And I remember him feeling me out my first weekend there. I went in, and he was a Raja Yogi. He was a Raja Yogi. He tuned right into Yogananda's teachings and put them to big use, and deep meditator. But no, just to give you a little example, I was, after 2 days of entering there in November 1st, I went in 74 and a weekend, and I thought, man, I'm finally here. I waited 1.5 years to get there, and my ego just burst open Sunday morning of that weekend, and I said, I can't do this. I can't stay here. This is real. This is real. This is for real. If I stay here, I'm not going to have any life. I mean, life of ego. So I was about ready to leave. And I hadn't talked to him yet. And I saw him in the kitchen. And I was ready to leave in a couple hours. And he looked at me and he said, why are you thinking of leaving? I mean, those are his first words ever to me. Why are you thinking of leaving? I went, uh-oh, this guy can read souls. So I told him, and he said, look, you waited. Let's just do this as a little deal. Give us 1 year. And if you're not happy after 1 year, go. But give us 1 year. I couldn't fault that. So I said, okay, give you 1 year. And that kind of was my thing I did every year for 25. If I wasn't growing spiritually somehow, if I wasn't changing on the way I wanted to change, I would have gone. When I came out in the year 2000, or just before, and eventually in about 6 months, I was married to Tricia, who had also been involved in the SRF lineage and supporting the cause as a lay disciple for many, many years. Met her while I was in the Ministry of Self-Realization Fellowship, and she was coming to the temple that I was speaking at regularly. And that was the first time she was coming through the line at the end, very respectfully in that tradition that people come and they pronoun to the minister after the talk. And she was the last one, and I noticed that she was pregnant, and so she waddled up. And but when I looked into her eyes, well, oh, I know this soul. I know this soul. But the first words that she said, I didn't agree with your sermon. That doesn't usually happen. So that was the first time my eyes set on her. But I also knew that if you're a monk for so many years, that you would just stay, if you have that instant attraction to someone that you think you knew from past lives or whatever, that I would just keep telling God, okay, well, next life, I'll see her next life. I'll be with her next life. This life, Lord, I'm giving it to you. But as the story goes along, then eventually she was serving with the nuns, and she was on a committee where I was the monk that was in charge of the committee, children's books. And so I got to see her there. Well, there she is again. And then my older sister became a student of SRF. And I told her that there's someone I think you should meet, because I knew Tricia's name then. I said, you should meet her. She's an excellent disciple, beautiful soul. So my sister met her, and they became good friends. So that's how the story goes. So I knew Tricia, but mostly, you know how I knew her? This is the total truth, that every time I looked out on those 3-hour meditations that I led on Friday night at the temple, there she was. And of all the people, because a lot of people were squirming and all this and that, and to this day, she's the best meditator I have ever seen. I mean, locked on. So I'm very fortunate that it ended up that I would be able to attract such a beautiful soul into my life, coming from a life, 25 years of living a spiritual life, because I knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, just like I knew my guru when he came to me, that this was the partner for me. Yeah.
Tom left in 99, and we got together about that time. You know, he was in a monastery for 25 years. He left, and he thought, well, the only thing I really know that translates out into the world is Hatha Yoga. So he put himself right into a yoga teacher training.
The ashram didn't have yoga classes for the monks. The Hatha Yoga. But as far as the Hatha Yoga goes, I decided to do some classes at the yoga room, hot yoga. Well, when I was at that hot yoga place, the teacher, she had her people who wanted to go on and teach there, they had to do a bunch of hours for free and teach classes for free. I did 1,000 hours for her. Never got paid. So I'm glad, because I got a lot of practice. Yeah.
I wasn't very fond of hot yoga. You know, I'm Pitta. We don't like hot yoga. But I decided, you know, I went along, and I realized that the depth, the heat and the depth of the yoga was quite good for me. I started the yoga teacher training, but the philosophy didn't resonate with me. So while he stayed for the 1,000 hours, I started shopping around for other teachers whose ways of teaching and what they were teaching was more aligned with me. So I ended up getting my 500 hours with Eric Schiffman and Judith Lassiter and Gary Mook and that sort of thing, and was very enriching for me. But I was so shy. I'm such an introvert that getting in front of a group of people and teaching was the hardest thing I have ever done. And I ran away from it for about a year or two. So between that time and the time we started The Soul, and even when it was in our house, I was reluctant to teach.
We got married and we purchased a house in Encinitas. But there was one caveat that I told Trish, that I didn't want to buy the house unless we somehow turned it into a little place where we could have retreats and have people over and make the gardens as beautiful as possible, kind of just because I was so used to Yogananda's gardens.
It was a really fun time because we had just moved into this house and it had a huge yard, and we designed it as a meditation place for us to be outside to meditate. And we had a covered porch, and we weren't sure what to do with it. It was huge. It was 550 square feet.
Not long after we were there, that we were, I was outside, and then came into our little sunroom, which was unfinished in some ways. And I was sitting there, and all of a sudden, this big idea came to me, and the idea was, we got to start the Soul of Yoga right in here, which means we'll build it out and have people come to the house. And it was so clear that I immediately went and told Tricia that. I said, we're going to have a yoga studio right here in our house.
One day he came in and it's like this light bulb went off and I could see it in his eyes. And he said, I've got it. I know where our yoga studio is. It's right here. And he took me out and he said, we're just going to enclose this and the door will be there. The ideal was that when people were doing yoga and that it was all windows instead of walls, that they would be seeing and imbibing and breathing in nature. So no mirrors. It was just them and the reflection of the oneness in nature. We called it Divine Mother. That was the environment. And I got it right away. I said, let's do this. So we figured out the logistics, had a friend come over and built the walls and the windows, and we were in business.
And sure enough, we built it out and started to have people come over. Made a postcard of these waterfalls that we had in our backyard and talked about how beautiful, and you could do yoga with glass windows looking out on these waterfalls and flowers and all this beauty, and all neighbors are welcome and all people, and we had a vision of beauty. We had a vision of beauty, and we had like soul that just, I just knew that the souls were going to be attracted to what we were offering there.
We wanted them to experience peace, and that's why we had the environment that we did. The people that we were hoping to draw, and we did draw, were people who were looking for a greater purpose in life. They were looking for happiness. They were looking for more harmony, and they were looking for greater health. So we actually, our first iteration was not called the Soul of Yoga. It was called the Soul Center. And that was the focus, that everyone who comes in there would be treated like a soul, treated equally with respect, and that they would begin to treat themselves and one another that way. So where we were envisioning harmony amongst the community. And that's exactly what happened. People would come in their highest and best nature, no matter how they felt. They would laugh and hug, do yoga together, breathe together, enjoy the beautiful nature, and heal.
So that's how the Soul of Yoga was born, and sure enough, they came.
Out of the gate, he was a superstar. The Soul Center thrived because of Tom. Tom kept saying to me, you have to teach. I can't do all the classes. Plus we need a female to teach as well. We've got to do this together. I resisted. And one time he couldn't show up. I had all the certifications I needed. He couldn't be there. So I said, okay, I'll do it. A couple walked in and they said, Tom isn't here? And the wife said, no, it's Trisha today. And he went, ah. And he started to leave and his wife stopped him and said, no, come on, let's give her a try. I wanted to run. I wanted to never teach after that, but I couldn't. We were in my house and I had to see it through. And that was the beginning of me realizing that because of my nature of being more reserved, it was going to take me longer to be comfortable in front of people. Even though I had I was an actress when I was younger. I was a performer. But it was different because you're given lines. You know, you don't have to show up as you show up as somebody else. And that was easy for me. But showing up as me in front of a group of people took me a couple of years to get used to. But fortunately, I stuck with it. And because I ended up finding my passion. And what happened was I started listening to myself, what I loved. I loved a more gentle practice, a deep practice. I loved sound. I loved teaching women and the prenatal, myself being a mother. When I started finding my passion and having the confidence to express it, and then people showing up for it, yes, that's when I said, this is what I'm meant to do. And that gave me the confidence to bring into the Soul of Yoga many different styles. So we started doing restorative yoga with Crystal Bowles, and we had arms and legs hanging out of the room. It was so full. We had a wait list.
And it was such a success that eventually the neighbors started complaining with the cars parking out in front of their driveways if there are a few houses from us. And so, but we were packing the house. We were packing this little 500 square foot space with about 20 students on a regular basis. And then from there, we realized, well, the neighbors complain, so maybe it's time to move. Maybe it's time to get a commercial place.
And that's when we got a letter from the HOA that said, we've had a complaint. And we didn't mind at the time. We knew that it was the universe saying to us, time to expand. We pretty much identified the space right away. We got it painted and beautified to the point where at least it looked a little bit like the home studio.
So we opened up a studio there and in Encinitas as well. 1,200 square feet, and it built rather quickly.
And we stayed there for less than a year because we outgrew that pretty quick. We found another space downstairs, and it kept growing. The foundation of everything that we did from the very get-go was environment is stronger than willpower. So we wanted to maintain the kind of environment we were in, and we wanted to create it for others, whether it was in a yoga class or what we called our Friday nights, Spirit Voyages. We did Friday night Spirit Voyages. We
were going along and realized, okay, well, let's have an immersion. So we created this thing called Immersion in Love 5-day retreat. That 5-day immersion was then the beginning of our 200 hours. And that teacher training was built on Patanjali's 8 steps of yoga. Not just an introductory to people of yoga with the Hatha yoga, but really getting into the science of yoga. How can we take the basic foundational principles of yoga and now go deeper in them with a life study to bring something that could be a possibility for people to experience themselves in a deeper way without a religion assigned to it, without this is the only way, just a safe space where you come in and you just feel a certain vibration.
Then when we rolled out the teacher training, we knew that the first thing would be to create an environment. And when we created that environment, we drew to it the people who were meant to be together. There weren't a lot of yoga studios doing what we were doing, in the sense that we took our rich Raja Yoga, the spiritual aspect, our background, and infused the Hatha Yoga. And so people who were looking for a deeper dive, not just into their bodies, but into their souls, we attracted them, and they went from doing yoga with us into the teacher training, where they were able to immerse in the philosophy of yoga. One of the deepest philosophies that we had was to help people find their own voice, their own passion, their own branch of yoga that would help them transform their lives and that they could express to others, taking you down a road to deeper understanding of you. Those gifts you might have shut off when you were younger, the things you were told you couldn't do, ways you become and do things you never thought you could, and the cleansing of the physical body of the trauma, of the tensions, of the stress, where you're infusing these new thoughts and ways of being and releasing the darkness from the body, along with the ancient and beautiful and flawless philosophy of yoga. They found themselves, a different aspect of themselves that they didn't even know or was denying was there. And as that started coming out, we saw these authentic connections between people, and of course us and the students, but between one another. And there are people who started in our teacher training and our yoga classes 15 or more years ago that are still friends to this day. And they're still our friends to this day.